When we think about the next 25, 50 years, we look towards kind of some leaders and thought leaders out there. And what we know for a fact is that there's never been a greater time of greater promise or greater peril. As we move into this fourth generation, AI, AR, VR, social unrest, and everything else, incredible wealth, incredible opportunity, the forces of disruption and innovation are shaping our future. What does this also mean? There are 44 million working age adults in America without a college degree who are not earning a living wage. When we look at the data, and these are just quick snapshots, it's not meant to be an eye chart, but there are concerns around the cost of college and the cost of school. If you look at this chart here, what you see, Goldman did this research, you see that the cost of the searches for traditional colleges versus online colleges, there's a split. Yet the searches for student debt and ways to take it on is increasing. The jobs of the future. We know that automation is taking over performance and manual labor, and about 47% of the total employment in the US is at risk of replacement. We also know that AI has the potential, on the flip side, to boost productivity by 40%. One of the net results of this is 85% of the jobs in 2030 don't exist yet. Who are we training for? What are we doing collectively if we don't know this? 70% of education spending in the US right now is currently spent on the first 22 years of life. Well, if we think about jobs not existing and we're only training people to get to age 22, what happens when their job goes away, when they're 24 or 26, and those new ones come on? Then what? We talk about AI. I'm happy to dive deep into this. We have companies who are working on this in real time right now. But the potential to disrupt education and the teaching profession, just a couple of quick stats. So we think of education 1.1, offline education, teachers' personalization, learning venue, efficacy, scalability, and operating cost. We can see it was human in these. When we move to 2.0, human teacher education, we see a change. We're now in a fundamental transformation with AI 3.0. AI, hot. Teachers, AI, let's talk about that in a bit. Personalization, very high, positive, right? Cost, very low, also positive. What are some real life examples that are going on around this? So let's look at where AI is being used. Starting back in 1993, and this is in China because they're actually a little further ahead of us, go figure. But looking at 1993, and we look at something like New Oriental, which actually Kaplan partnered with. So when I was in Asia and worked in Asia, we worked with them on the English language piece. And it wasn't all that kind of fancy at that point, right? We still had a better product. But we look at how now with Tall and English First, starting in 2000, you're starting to see other companies come up. Full disclosure, we're investing in VIP Kid. It is another unicorn in education. And Cindy is doing amazing things with her platform. So a unicorn is a company that's worth $1 billion, right? In education, Uber, Lyft, all that, it seems pretty obvious. In education, there are very few unicorns. We look at 2005 to 2012, there were only 6 unicorns created. Starting in 2013 to 2018, we've seen 24. So the number of unicorns is astronomical, and it's mainly driven by digital, right? The digital revolution, which we'll get into. But part of that digital is VIP Kit, and we're already on the next level with VIP and Cindy leading the way. So where did all this come about? How do we place this into context? I'm not going to stand in front of a room full of educated people and educators talking about industrial revolutions, because I think we all know this. But what I do want to point out is that during the second industrial revolution, 17% of the jobs required knowledge workers versus 60% in 2018. In the third revolution, the invention of the computer destroyed 3.5 million jobs. That was big numbers for those days. But what happens in the fourth? Well, there's huge promise, right? So it's not all in gloom and doom. There is huge promise to raise incomes and improve the quality of life. New products and services will help us. And there's a supply side miracle. right? Everyone loves Amazon delivered. There's promise in that. But at the same time, there's huge potential peril, right? And I'm not going to, just in the interest of time, because I want to get to the meaty conversation, but some of the points here. What does this mean for education and for us as educators? Well, we're at a tipping point as the gap widens between skills delivered by the current system and those required by the digital economy. A tipping point. We're in the perfect place in history to do something about it and to make change. But what does that tipping point look like? Well, talent more than capital will represent a critical factor in production. Additionally, if we're not careful, we're going to have low skill, low pay jobs, and therefore the individuals who occupy them, segregated from high skill, high pay. We don't need to look back to as far as the French Revolution to understand what happens there, right? And here's something else. We always grew up, everyone in this room grew up with the 3 R's. Although no one could spell, apparently, but anyway. We still grew up with the 3 R's, which is a competency-based skill set. Can you write? We heard about that earlier in early childhood. Ron spoke about that and others. Can you read? But now we're actually moving, and what we have to train for are those skills that are uniquely human and not easily automated. So creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. Other people have thrown around the compassionate citizenship, given the times we're living in today. But we need to switch from the 3 R's to the 4 C's. It's imperative that we do that. If we don't, sorry, go ahead.
No longer learn to read and write.
Well, we should so that we can, yeah, and if we don't do it in the traditional sector, others will. Others will do it for us. So let's just look at what's going on in education as a whole. Most of the spending, as we know, is coming out of government, but that's changing, right? That's switching very quickly. And so if we just kind of pause and think about it, the enabling technologies of the fourth revolution and the new demand for skills, so we have a demand shock, right, are fundamentally changing the landscape to meet a supply shock because we need new skills. So there's a demand shock and a supply shock. This is driven by, so we think about the technology. Internet speed has gone up. Everyone has something in their pocket, a phone, a tablet, access to a computer. If you look at the stats, or just about everyone. If you look in the developing world, it's better than in inner city America often, but the device sales are gone up. So there's access now. We have a broken college model, which we're going to jump into for the future, and we have a digital skills gap. In 2008, there were 53 startups addressing some of these needs. That number is 4,000. I actually think that number is higher, depending on which stats. This is a conservative estimate of the number of ed tech startups in this space. So we can't say there isn't innovation trying to address this, but what is the right? Where is their quality? How do we get to this? And let's just put this into context, right? Because we talk about education and we can be in our own bubble. But let's think about when it's a digital world that we're moving to, let's think about digital penetration. So right now, the percentage of digital spend in education is 3%. Okay? If we think about 3% in retail, that was in 2008. Bezos was just getting going, et cetera, et cetera. Currently, on an $8 trillion market, we're at about 10% digital penetration in retail. And think of what our world has looked like in the past 10 years, from 2008 to now. 3% to 10%. So we are right now just at the very cusp of that change. Ultimately, yes, we do have to read and write. Doing math would be kind of nice. But we no longer pay people for what they know because Google does that, whether we agree if it's right or wrong, but we don't pay people for that anymore. We pay them now for what you can do with what you know. Our education system doesn't fix that today. So this is our mission. This is the team of experts that I've brought up here to talk about a little more about the data, a little more about what's going on, and then looking at some practical solutions, some real life solutions of how they are fundamentally changing the education landscape. So I'd like to introduce Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne Berger-Sweeney, and I am going to start by saying, fundamentally, I am an introvert. So standing up in front of people, you will get my authentic self, which is a little bit quieter, I'm afraid, than you were, but I appreciate us both. So I thought if I was asked to introduce myself with a tweet, here I am. First female, first Black president of Trinity College in its almost 200-year history in the heart of Hartford, Connecticut. A neuroscientist with 2 patents on Alzheimer's-related drugs, who almost never saw students of color in my science classes at the elite liberal arts college where I taught and did my research. Now impassioned about creating equitable pipelines for liberal arts, flexible learners, and citizens who will work and become leaders in solving the world's wicked problems. My favorite teacher, Dr. Joseph Coyle, my dissertation advisor at Johns Hopkins.
Thank you. Andrea.
All right, Andrea Bennin. I work for Strada Education Network, where I lead strategic investments. So Strada, we're a 501c3 public charity that's focused on investing and supporting mission-aligned solutions. So our mission essentially is to help learners gain access to meaningful career pathways. The way that we do that is through investments and philanthropy and thought leadership. My why. I'm not sure how many of you know me. I'm a child of. I'm also an immigrant, but child of an immigrant mother that immigrated here from Ghana. I mean, there are a couple of Guineans in this room, so shout out to Ghana. So my why is being able to level the playing field for all learners in this space, and specifically Black learners. The way that I do that is by taking the experiences that I've learned over the years and trying to apply them in the way that I invest, the way that I support the portfolio companies that we invest in, et cetera. If I was to say, think about a favorite teacher in my life, it'll be my mom, like hands down. That lady, she instilled in me more lessons that I could think of and more lessons that I learned even in the traditional higher ed system and even in grad school. So, my mom, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Ellison. I'm the CEO and founder of CoPath. And I grew up in a low-income background, rural Maine. And sometimes you had good teachers, sometimes you didn't. My high school English teacher, we didn't read books, we'd watch videos instead. So if you can imagine, instead of reading Macbeth, you watch a movie and you're grade on who's the cutest actor. That was an unfortunate part of my high school experience. Luckily, I did have some great teachers as well. And then I was able to go on to found 6 different additional organizations, including I'm the founder of Silicon Valley Unicorn, and have founded one of the world's largest organizations supporting professional female engineers. And it couldn't have happened unless I had the support of a lot of really great people. One of the teachers that stands out is my high school science teacher for chemistry. I love science, love math. So, that really put me on the right path.
Thank you. So you can see we have a distinguished panel here, lots of experts and lots of expertise. But first I want to hear from you. So please take out your phones again. Go to menti.com, 98931. 98931. Show of hands. Are we on? All right, let's give it 30 more seconds. Technical skills in evidence. Okay, we'll blame the internet. Okay, hands, are we on? Thank you. So, first question. Which language is most widely used today? Is it PHP, French, Python, Mandarin, JavaScript, or English?
In how many countries or how many people?
The world.
The world.
World.
In the world.
So numbers of people in the world.
Yep. Which language is most widely used?
By individuals or?
Come on.
Just answer the question.
Okay, going back to the 3 R's. Let's go back to the 3 R's. I think we have Google for that. Okay, so let's see what you said. JavaScript
good.
came out. Chinese, some more people coming in.
It's a programming language. Facebook uses it, but not many other companies.
Okay, so the answer is,
Oh,
Javas.
am I back to, JavaScript. You guys are right. So 94.9% of all websites use JavaScript, right? Websites are accessed by 4.4 billion people daily. But the average world internet user spends 6.5 hours per day. Right? So what does that mean? One thing it means is that there are a lot of computer programming jobs that we need to fill. So there are 1.4 million jobs, but yet each year, and this is just one example, we only graduate about 400,000 computer science graduates. And who are those graduates when we think about equity? Well, it's primarily white and male. Black students earn 3.2%, and Latinx at 6.35% of computer science degrees. And while the number of white students grew by 15% in the last 5 years, the number of black students fell by a commensurate amount. Languages of the future. There are almost no black computer science faculty, and the women's share of computer science degrees declined from 28 to 18. It's problems we have to solve, folks. We have a leaky pipe, clearly. We have a leaky pipe. So computer science programs currently are designed to weed out students, right? It was a very small field. It was a very kind of structured field. And they were weeding out students. So only 35% of high schools in the US teach computer science. These are all US stats now. Black students are 10 points less likely than white students to have classes dedicated to computer science at the schools that they attend. And those schools reaching the most diverse student populations, translation, free and reduced lunch, right, are the least likely to offer computer science in school. They also fill introductory courses in college, filter out students too. So not only at the K-12 level are we seeing this, and at the teaching level, but also in college, right? Black and Hispanic students, female students. The data supports this. The result, 1/3 less likely to graduate.
So one of the things I'll tell you that Trinity College started doing was stopping using the SAT as criteria to get into the institution. So we became test optional about 4 years ago, and I entered 5 years ago. The second thing that we did was make sure that students who come in on financial aid at the lowest level, those who are getting Pell Grants, apply for financial aid once for their entire 4 years. Because we found out that the people who receive Pell Grants are some of the poorest in our society, and their likelihood of moving up in the 4-year period is very low, such that every time you ask them to fill out the forms again, you're basically saying, do you remember you're poor? Now, last year we told you you're poor. Do you still remember you're poor? So we actually eliminated that, such that 4 years at the institution, we give you a financial aid package when you walk in the door. Hence, it's important. We have done things like starting first-generation orientation programs so that from the moment you walk in the door, you feel as though you have a place to belong, even if your parents did not go to college. And I'll tell you just 2 more things. We have introduced, I think everybody read an article on design thinking. We now have design thinking as part of our orientation for all students. We went and trained at Stanford. We have a number of experts on our campus, and we do that, such that our overall retention rate is 90.7%. So if you come to Trinity College, the likelihood that you're graduating is very, very high. And we are one of the only colleges in the US where if you are a Pell Grant recipient, you have a greater likelihood of being retained and graduating than if you're a white student. So, a couple of things.
So CoPath, I mean, as you guys can probably tell from the name, we're probably focused on coding. And it's very important, I think, to emphasize why software engineering is so important, why we are picking that area to close the equity gap. The #1 source of new wages in the United States are coming from computing jobs. And if you look at STEM more broadly, you have around 56% of the new jobs in STEM are actually in software engineering, and only 10% of STEM graduates are actually majoring in computer science. When you talk with major technology companies, I'll put another interesting stat out there. We have 17 billion internet-connected devices in the world right now. That's going to more than double by 2025. And when you think of technologies like AI and what they can do with more powerful processing power, no matter how small the device is, no matter where it is in the world, it's going to be able to perform complex applications. Computers are talking to other computers more than any human is currently talking to any other human, and that's only going to scale over the coming years. So it's imperative that we have as many people as possible who are able to leverage those tools. And when you're thinking about engineering jobs and what that means from an employer difference, engineers create their own tools. Imagine if you were able to 1,000x your productivity by building a tool that changes the way your role works while maintaining quality. And that's the promise of software engineering. So CoPath has been around for the past 6 years. We've been the top technical training organization in Silicon Valley for most of that time period. We created Facebook's, or we upgraded Facebook's global engineer onboarding program. We're still their top technical training partner. And these are senior engineers. They're 5, 6, 7 years plus professional experience, created Airbnb's first ever engineer onboarding program. So for years, we have specialized in teaching experts cutting edge technologies. We also wanted to figure out how could we scale this. And when we created CoPath.org as a nonprofit, we wanted to figure out how we could focus on underrepresented and low-income populations, because those are the populations that end up not getting into tech whatsoever. Facebook has a program that is designed to get more underrepresented people into tech. It's called Facebook University. We've been running that for the past 4 years. The first year that we started running that, it was actually, okay from a gender ratio standpoint. Very few Latinx or Black students. And most of the participants in the program were millionaires. There's a couple billionaires in the program. So a lot of these tech companies, when they're thinking about diversity, they aren't necessarily thinking about equity. And then they also are definitely not thinking about systemic change. So we wanted to figure out how we would be able to take these courses that were available inside of major technology companies and make it so that it was a part of every community. and there was no cost. And how could we actually think of a systemic solution to increasing diversity in tech? So we started to actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, train students a semester in advance to deliver our in-person courses, primarily because professors didn't really want to talk to us. And then we were running these semester-long courses. One example is Howard University. The former chair of the CS department, Dr. Berger, heard about one of our courses from one of the students because he wanted to learn iOS development. And his campus didn't offer it, and he didn't know it. So he sat in one of our classes that was actually student-led. We were remotely doing the grading, remotely supporting the students, our curriculum, and we were controlling the majority of the student experience. And then the next semester, Dr. Berger ended up offering that course on the campus, but we still were controlling all aspects of the student experience. To date, we have operated on 49 colleges and universities, the same curriculum across every single site, teaching iOS, cybersecurity, Android, about 6 courses right now. And so we have a really clear picture of what should be added or changed in order to bridge the gaps that students have with industry. And to give you an idea, Purdue University, University of Washington, Howard, Alabama A&M, Cal State Monterey Bay, Merritt College, all these schools are offering these courses where you have a really clear data signal on exactly how you can have a custom program to increase completion rates and performance, and then ultimately get jobs for students in these programs. One last thing that I want to mention, because there's a lot of things we do a little bit differently. One of the key philosophies has been actually making it so that we decrease time that professors spend in the classroom. And one way we do that is through a selection process where instead of grading students after the course has already happened, we actually have every student for every course take an assessment that's part of the admissions process so that we know and can predict how difficult and the level of rigor required for the course so that they're going to have high completion rates. It's been a game changer for having success across a lot of different schools and programs. So we're very much about changing how CS is being taught and also what it's being delivered in a way that makes it really easy for tech companies to say, pick the student from San Jose State University over that's outperforming the student from Purdue University.
I just want to add the one element, and that is, I'm at a liberal arts college now, which means we teach broad skill sets. And we've just initiated a partnership with Infosys, which is the second largest technology consulting firm in India, which means it's pretty darn big. And we have a relationship with them that we take employees from liberal arts programs all over the country to train and give them the specific skill set that they will need to be business analysts in technology. So instead of just looking at technology grads or people with CS or other kinds of STEM degrees, they actually are very interested in liberal arts graduates because they think they have those broad analytical skills that then they can specialize and teach them in about 13 weeks what they need to do business consulting. So there's more than one pathway to get jobs at the end.
That's a great segue. Thank you. So, could you please pull out your phones? What skills do you think are most often missing in preparing students for employment?
I think you're going to get to speak on this one out.
Yes. Well, it's fine. All right, we're just about there. So, looks like ability to work with ambiguity is just slowly inching out, is winning. Working with teams and people and writing and oral communication are coming in second for you guys, followed by digital literacy, creativity, Reading interpretations at the bottom. It's interesting.
We're doing that pretty well.
So what does the panel think? Well, when we look at the skills of the future and what we need to build for our courses, what courses and programs we need to build for our students, we actually need to think of learning as now T-shaped. It used to be I-shaped, where you went straight down and you were vertical and you got more and more and more and more and specialized. So not to insult anyone in the room, but that quarter that he could throw at the PhDs is a perfect example of being vertically specialized and getting deeper and deeper. Some fields you probably still want that. Neurosurgeon, probably a good thing. But for most fields, this T-shape, where you have a breadth of knowledge across the board and then a depth of knowledge in certain areas, is what's needed for the future. And when you think about the future and what's needed, this will repeat over and over and over again. We all know the stats about millennials hopping jobs. We all just saw that jobs are disappearing and will reform. So this T-shape needs to be repeated over and over. But what are the types of skills that are on the T-shape that we're looking at? Well, across the top are the human skills. Broad capacities in self-awareness and critical thinking around interpersonal, essential, and career readiness. The deep are the technical skills, right? Deep expertise in an industry or a field of training. Andrea, you're working with a lot of companies that are doing this. Do you want to share with us some examples?
Sure. So at Strada, as I mentioned, that we're investing at the intersection of education and employment. Like one thing that we do, a lot of the companies that we are starting to trying to invest in. Initially, when we started down the path of direct investing, we were looking at companies that centered along the student life cycle. So college success, et cetera. But we're starting to see there's a paradigm shift in terms of student success, and the shift into upskilling and reskilling, more companies that are really helping specific training. And as we're in terms of this panel, we mentioned last mile training, but there's a clear distinction between last mile training and also on-ramps. So on-ramps are more for college educated students. So getting the skills that will get them employed, but also for last mile, it's professionals like yourselves that are looking to pivot into new directions. So some of the companies that we've invested in to date include Reviture. So it's a company that's really focused on IT training. Another company that we've invested in is Genuine, which combines staffing and last mile training. So folks that are looking to get employed or getting placed into different jobs, but layering skills that will help them be employable. There are companies that we're looking at right now, and no offense to Michael and Dr. Berger, but software engineering and coding is not the end all be all. Is great and terrific,
Michael,
but
what do you think about that?
Well, the majority of middle skill
Completely agree with that.
the majority of middle skill and high skill jobs require you to work with software. So even if you don't say it's coding, I mean, how many of you can get by without working on a computer in your job? So, every job requires software. You have to work with a computer. You need digital skills. Data literacy is a big thing as well. And then, coding, it's really just being comfortable with more different types of tools that are best tools for your profession.
that's a good point. But again, my position is it's not the end all be all. So I spent some time working in state government, and as you look across the entire United States, like every governor that you approach will tell you that their issue is not enough jobs. And we have jobs, but you don't have the right people. You don't have the folks that are in our pipeline that are unemployed or underemployed don't have the right skills to fill those jobs. So how do you marry those two? How do you fix those issues? So to that point, you not only have software engineering job, but you also have advanced manufacturing job, but also data analytics, data training platforms. So some of the companies that we're looking at, we're trying to pivot away. We've invested in companies that are focused on software engineering and coding, but also we're looking at companies that are in like data science, data analytics, but also advanced manufacturing, some of those more technical skills, like even like construction management, et cetera.
So what about like boot camps, right?
Right.
So boot camps are a perfect example of coding. You have something like General Assembly, which picked up Ivy League students, gave them 6 to 12 weeks and got them into Google. Or you have, a host of others that pick up lower income at different thoughts, how this works, what you guys are doing similarly.
I have a couple thoughts. You go
Yeah,
ahead.
I have some thoughts about that
So
as
we're
well.
talking about
Why
coding.
not surprisingly?
So we like one of the very first slide that we teed up was 44 million of adults are essentially struggling. So we have folks that are nodding their heads in the back that we're looking to invest in, but 8 million of those 44 million are Black learners. Something to think about, right? So what are we doing in this room to really remedy that? So for us, where we sit at Strada is how are we going to invest in companies that will impact those Black learners? I mean, we're also confidential. We're also looking at CoPath as well, like trying to find ways to partner in his company.
So one thing I have to say about just boot camps in general.
Hold up. Does everybody know what a coding boot camp is? You guys are.
So coding boot camps typically are short-term training programs that will promise very high salaries in software engineering, has been the typical case in a short period of time, maybe 8 to 10 months. And so there's very much like, hey, you're nowhere near becoming a software engineer and you're just going to be able to skip, say, a college education, or maybe you don't have to go to college. So it's become very popular. However, you have less than 1%, around 1% of the boot camp participants are Black. So it's less diverse than tech companies. You have around 59% they've gone to school, they have advanced degrees, they've already done some coding on their own. There's been a bunch of programs popping up in order to prepare you to then get into your boot camp, which sounds like it doesn't really make sense. And then from an employer standpoint, the rise in employer apprenticeship programs is because they haven't been able to convert enough boot camp graduates into full-time hires that then have career trajectory. So if you interview like a vice president of engineering or a CTO, then boot camp models are kind of, they're not that enthusiastic for that.
But you made a point in terms of General Assembly. So the model is very skewed towards folks that have degrees and like prestigious degrees. But you look at companies, there are certain companies now that are more focused on folks that don't necessarily have like skills. Like you have the whole burden of the world. You have the Kinsey Academies of the world that are really looking to solve issues with learners that are underrepresented. So.
Oh, we're in them too.
I'm
That's
going
right.
to ask, how many
Got it.
people here at the age of 18 knew what you wanted to do as a profession and have remained in that profession to this day? A few, but the majority of the people in the room have not. So what I want to remind people is that even though we invest a lot in education and people are 18 to 22, it's because they're trying out things and figuring out what they're probably good at and what they might not be so good at. I will use as an example my daughter. My daughter, I will tell you, is brilliant. She just graduated summa cum laude from Wellesley College in astrophysics. I'm proud of her. You can clap. Yay! But she will never go into another astrophysics lab in her life because she went to 2 during her college career and she said, Mom, I can't sit in front of a computer my whole life. I need to talk with people. And right now, astrophysics, as it's practiced, is sitting and modeling in front of a computer. So remember that some of the things that we're doing during these early years are figuring out what we do well and figuring out what we don't do well. And it's a reminder that even though we're focused here on that first job, we know statistic after statistic is that these students will change jobs multiple times and many more times than we did in our career. So we're also trying to think in college, not just about training people for that first job, but the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and how to learn, unlearn, and relearn, because those are really the skill sets that I think will help them for a long time. If you ask me how I think college education can be most disrupted, I'm not so sure it's so much the content as the timing. That maybe what you need to do is a couple of years of background skills, then go out, work, do a couple of things, then come back and retrain, then go back out into the world. So if you ask me about disruption, it isn't necessarily how we learn. I could talk a lot about that as a neuroscientist specializing in learning and memory, but it's that probably we need to spread it out over a long period of time and figure out a financial model that's going to do that a bit better.